Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another 2021 Overwatch League roster breakdown video. Today, we will be taking a look at the Vancouver Titans. Very interesting team, of course, formerly the Runaway Squad. This team, dominated in 2019, Grand Finals appearance where they lost to the San Francisco Shock. They go into 2020 with this same roster, a couple new pieces, and after only about 4 games, they end up dissolving that roster, completely scrapping it, rebuilding with a bunch of contenders players, with a Western focus on the roster. Going into 2021 now, the roster is still a Western-focused roster. Some of the same pieces, some new pieces as well, so let's talk about this team, look at what they are, and what we can gather from this 2021 Titans roster. Starting off, we have the tank line. We have a Shredlock, who is one of the returning players from this Titans roster last season. He is their main tank. All around, not an awful player. I wasn't super impressed with his play. I thought he was pretty mediocre, pretty average. He wasn't a liability, but he was not, well, I take that back. He wasn't making plays in a lot of instances, and I think this team was really, they never really had synergy because they were playing from all different parts of the world. They never really could develop that synergy, so I do give him a bit of leeway in that regard, because what are you going to do when you don't really know what to expect, and you're never really with your team. You're always just kind of in different areas. Yeah, there was some synergy with Shredlock and some of the other second win guys, but there are definitely still some limitations to the play that we saw from Shredlock. He's not notably awful on any of the main like, he can play them all. He's pretty average at them. He's not going to bring anything incredible. He's not going to bring anything special or unique. I think he's a pretty just middle of the pack player, if not lower end of the main tank spectrum. So I want to see a lot from Shredlock, and this is kind of a theme across the board with this Vancouver Titans team. I need to see them take another step. I need to see these players play better than what we saw them do the last time we saw them. I need to see a better version of Shredlock than what we saw in 2020. He can't be playing the same way he did last season. They need him to step up if they want to be contenders in a really good North America region. Same goes for his off-tank buddy, Fried Wiener. He's back, baby! The Fried Wiener himself. No more FRD, no more Fried. It's all Fried Wiener. He has made it back, baby! Anyway, formerly playing for the Atlanta Reign, of course, our good old pal Fried Wiener is now back, moving over to the Vancouver Titans. I think he's pretty good. Hawk was a better off-tank. Hawk replaced him for a reason. But it is a very good thing to see somebody who was not awful on the Atlanta Reign move over to a team that has this kind of need. But once again, we need to see Fried Wiener. I can't say his name without laughing. We need to see Nathan here take another step in the positive direction. We need to see him take his game to another level. He needs to be an elevated player from what we saw in 2019 and 2020. We didn't see a lot of him in 2020. He didn't play a lot. So I need to see a little more out of him going into this season. But he's a good player, and I think that he has a lot of upside. But there is a very, very, very stacked position at off-tank. There's a lot of really good off-tank players. And you're asking good old Fried Wiener, Nathan Goebel here, to be one of the best in the league. That's very difficult when you have a really good set of off-tanks in the league. So this is another instance where I'm like, he's good, but is he good enough to really make this Vancouver Titans team really good, like an elite level team? I don't really think so. But he can prove me wrong, and he can definitely elevate his game to the point where he is able to kind of prove people wrong, look better than what we've seen from him I think that is the ideal thing that we need to see out of a lot of these players in the Vancouver Titans. We need to see them take the next step. We need to see them look better. We need to see them look like a significantly improved player to take that next step going into 2021 to make this Vancouver Titans team competitive with the rest of the league. I think it's going to be difficult. To me, like, I look around the league and I look at the tank lines. This is probably, in my opinion, a bottom 3 tank line in the Overwatch League. We don't know what the LA Valiant one is yet, so I'm not going to count that one, of course. But, I think that there's reasonable doubts with, say, the Paris Eternal roster, though I do think they looked very good this past weekend when they were playing against the Boston Uprising in the Steel Series Invitational. They looked pretty good, but you still have to kind of ask, how good are they going to be compared to this roster? But even then, I still think I would take the Eternal over this tank line. This is one of, in my opinion, the weakest tank lines. And this is not I want to say this isn't a bash at Shredlock and Fried Wiener, because I do think they're good players, but the main tank and off tank are such important positions. And off tank is such a stacked role. You need to have the best of the best, and it's really hard to find them. I don't know if these two are going to be able to elevate this team to another level. It is something I'm very, very worried about, and I'm skeptical of how well they will be able to actually take this team to another level. I struggle to see them do it successfully. I hope I'm wrong, but I really do think this is going to be a team with a tank line that struggles a lot, and that is my biggest concern. This tank line is really my biggest concern of any. It is the thing that I'm the most worried about of anything. Moving on to the support line, we can talk about a player I actually think very highly of, and that is Fire. Formerly played for the Atlanta Reign. He was on the bench a lot. He didn't get a ton of play time, but when he did, I thought he was pretty good. All things considered, I think that he is an immediate upgrade over Karkar. That is one of the things that I think needs to be talked about and noted. This is the weakest link on this team last season was Karkar. Hands down, he was the biggest issue they had. Fire is an immediate improvement over Karkar, and I think he's a pretty significant improvement over Karkar. I think he will be a very high-impact player. I had talked about him last season when I did my 5 players I think should get traded to different teams. He was one of the players, and the Vancouver Titans were one of the spots I thought he could fit really well. They needed a new main support. He comes in. I thought he was talented. He got to play alongside some really talented players with the Atlanta Reign, including Fried. He was with Fried Wiener, a good pal. And so he got to play alongside somebody who's now his teammate. So that pre-existing synergy is helpful and something that is useful when you have this team that is kind of building up synergy. Any synergy you have already is useful, and I think that is one of the things that Fire does very well for this team. He has the connection already with a player, and he is a good player, someone who has had a ton of improvement. I think someone who looks pretty good, all things considered. So I do really like the addition of Fire. They also have Rolf on this team. He is the flex support for this team. Long history, of course, going back all the way to 2016. He's been in the league for a long time, starting with One Shot, Method, Cloud9, Gladiators Legion, Second Wind. I mean, he has been around the league. He has been pretty much everywhere. So it is something to look at when you look at just how many of these players have played in different places, how far they've gone. They've gone everywhere. So an interesting one here, I think. He's an older player. He's been around for a while. He's 25. I was never that impressed with him. He was always somewhat concerning. I was just never impressed with the way he played. I thought he was always pretty average. I think there's a lot of better flex supports in the league. There's better Western flex supports in contenders and in the league, and I can't say I was super impressed with Rolf last season. So I need to see more improvement out of him. I need to see a big step forward from him. Once again, I give some leeway to some of these players because they were on a team that did not have time to play together. They never played together, in person, and some of them, they were in different parts of the world. So, I expect this team to be better than it was last season, but even still, I just think this team has a lot of just middle of the pack, kind of low level talent that I need to see take a step into the next level and in the right direction. I think Rolf is arguably the weakest link on this team. In my opinion, it's between Rolf and Shredlock. Those, to me, are the two weakest pieces on this team. They're the two players I'm the most concerned about their success long term. And so, if you are me, I think this team is going to struggle. I think they need more depth. I think 7 players is a horrible idea when you have a team that really has a ton to prove. I think if you're building a team from scratch, you cannot budget ball it, go 7 players. When the most proven player on this roster is Linkser, and even that is still pretty limited because the Outlaws never really found a lot of success. So I have a lot of problems with that. We can move on to the DPS finally. I just teased it, so let's talk about them. Linkser, of course, formerly with the Houston Outlaws, comes over to this team. I think it's a good signing. I think Linkser has actually been playing pretty well the past couple of years. He's had some ups and downs, but I think his best play we've seen out of him was actually in this past season. I thought late in the season he was a huge part of kind of the resurgence of the Outlaws and that the team played better because he started to play at a higher level and he was able to kind of perform and be that consistent hit scan player for the Outlaws. And so I think he comes into this team and he brings a lot of really good hit scan play. In particular, his Widow is very good, and I think he is going to get a lot of play time. I wouldn't be surprised if he's the primary hit scan player for this team because he is so good. You're pairing him with Dalton, who has a Widow and a Reaper, but really his bread and butter is the Tracer. And I think he's going to be the Tracer specialist for this team. I think Linkser is going to be your Widow, your McCree, your Ashe, your pure hit scan. Dalton's going to be your Tracer, and if you need a double hit scan meta, or you need a Reaper, maybe, or like a McCree Widow composition, that's probably where you'll see Dalton come in. I think Dalton's actually pretty good. I was actually impressed with the way he played. I thought he was one of the parts for this team that worked the best last season. I think it was Shockwave and Dalton were the two best pieces of this team last season. You throw KSA in there as well, who I thought was pretty promising, and I'm surprised they didn't carry on with him this season. And so I think that this DPS lineup is actually the strength of this roster. And I think if this team wants to succeed, this is really who they need to kind of lean on. They need those big plays from Linkser, those big plays from Dalton, and they need to see some success from the only rookie on this team and the only Korean player on this team, Teru. Now, one of the things that the Titans had a problem with last season was they did not have a dedicated flex DPS player. They were putting players in a flex position. Some of those players were not flex DPS players. Shockwave, Suna, and Dalton are all some level of hit scan. They are not flex DPS players. And though there was a really, really, really good Echo out of Shockwave, he was a Widowmaker player. He wanted to play Widow. He wants to be a hit scan player. So there was just a lot of problems with the way the DPS worked for this team last season. But now you have a dedicated flex DPS player. Teru can play your Genji, your Pharah. He can play your Echo, your Doomfist. He is going to be your main flex, projectile DPS player. He played with O2 Blast for the 2020 season, so he was on a pretty solid team, a team that found a lot of success in 2020. You look at some of the people that they had, Yakpung is an owl. Pelican is an owl. They also have some people who've been there for a while, like Proper and Finn. This is a team that's had a lot of success. They even added some London Spitfire players recently, which doesn't really matter, but it is what it is. Kalios and Kaiser were on this team. So there's a lot of really talented players that were on this team. So this is a good team that has had a lot of really good players come through it. And so Teru is a good player. He's a very good flex DPS player. He's not the best flex DPS player, I think, that was added in the league, but he's good and he's a solid player, and I think he brings a ton of much needed flexibility for this team where they did not have it last season. They did not have a dedicated projectile flex DPS player. So that is a huge improvement for this team, and I think that is why the DPS lineup is the main thing I'm looking at. I look at this team and I think they need to have a similar type of success as what we saw from the LA Valiant last year. And it's funny because I said the same thing about the London Spitfire in my last video, that they need to rely on the likes of Shax and Blase and Sparker, right? They need to put those players into a position to succeed. They need to put the success of their team on those players' backs, and that is how they will kind of perform at the highest level, I think. The reality with this team is, I think that you have to do a lot of the same thing, if not the same thing entirely. I look at this roster and I say there are a lot of holes and a lot of things that you kind of hope to get out of some players who have not proven themselves at the highest level. You only have 7 players. You don't have any substitutes except for the DPS lineup. So if you have a bad main tank game, if Shredlock starts to struggle, if Fried Wiener starts to struggle, if Rolf Fire, they start struggling, you got to find people to replace these players mid-season. So you kill some of your synergy, you run into problems, and your season's over, right? I don't think it's a good idea to have a 7-player roster when you're this weak as a team, when you're struggling to kind of... This is a team that has not proven themselves. And I think going that budget route, only giving 7 players a chance on this team, you're showing these 7 players that you believe in them and that you're going all in on them. But from an outside perspective, I look at this as you're not trying. Right? Like, to me, this looks like a team that says we want to build a Western roster. That's all we care about, really. So we're just going to sign 7 players and just kind of hope. Like, the signing of Teru is good. It gives me some hope. This is the type of thing where I'd expect them to sign, like, a Western DPS player, like Wub. Like, he's the type of player that I could have seen them sign instead because he's, a flex player like that. He was supposed to join the San Francisco Shock originally, but he ended up... that ended up not happening because of Nero being signed and all this other stuff. But, I look at this and I just think, like, this team doesn't really look like a team that's really trying. And maybe they are. And maybe we're seeing some of these players who have a lot left that we just haven't seen yet. And I think it's very possible. And I think it's very likely that is something that we just haven't seen yet. And we haven't seen the best of these players yet. But even still, I'm very concerned about this team, and I really don't feel like this is a team that is going to be competing at the highest level. I don't think they're going to be sticking in with a lot of these really good teams because I just think they have too many weaknesses, and there's too much... You have to see almost like an inhuman, ungodly jump from all of these players, in my opinion, for them to be competitive with the entirety of the Overwatch League. I think this Titans roster is not atrociously bad. This Titans team would beat a number of teams from Overwatch League past who are kind of pretty bad. Like, they're better than Boston from last year, 100%. I think they're better than that team. I think they're better than early Washington from last season. They have talent, they have pieces, but when the league talent is getting better and better every season, I think it's really difficult to be the best. They're not going to go winless. They're going to get wins against some of your other teams that are not as good. If there are times when they can kind of rely really heavily on their DPS players and you don't really need as much out of your tanks and your supports, I think you can really see this Titans roster kind of flex in those situations. And if they let their DPS players kind of do their thing, they have a chance in a lot of these matches. But I have a lot of concerns about this team. and I think that they are one of the lower end teams in the league. I really wish we got to see them play in a preseason game, but we have not seen that yet, so I'll keep my fingers crossed that we get another tournament invitational sometime that they can play in, and we can kind of get a look at how this team is playing right now. But they're really one of the only teams that we have nothing of, that we have seen almost no footage from, and so I am a little bit curious to see what this team looks like actually in-game and not just on paper. But that is all from me for this Titans roster. Let me know your thoughts on this roster down below, and let me know your thoughts on my thoughts on this roster, what you feel about what I said. If you agree, disagree, I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. But that's all from me for today. If you enjoyed and want more content like this in the future, consider liking and subscribing. But I'm going to get out of here. Thank you all so much once again. I hope you are all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.